Hello, welcome to Sound and Fairy Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm doing a book review of The Bones Beneath My Skin by TJ Klune. This is a book coming out February 4th, 2025. It's a sci-fi fantasy from Tor. I received this art from NetGalley in exchange for a fair review. A sort of cozy adventure with a slow burn and satisfying queer love story, The Bones Beneath My Skin is an enjoyable read that feels a bit different from Klune's other works. What is it about? In the spring of 1995, Nate Cartwright has lost everything. His parents are dead, his older brother wants nothing to do with him, and he's been fired from his job as a journalist in Washington, D.C. With nothing left to lose, he returns to his family's summer cabin outside the small mountain town of Roseland, Oregon, to try and find some sense of direction. The cabin should be empty. It's not. Inside is a man named Alex, and with him is an extraordinary little girl who calls herself Artemis Darth Vader. Artemis, who isn't exactly as she appears. Soon it becomes clear that Nate must make a choice. Let himself drown in the memories of his past or fight for a future he never thought possible. Because the girl is special, and forces are descending upon them who want nothing more than to control her. I didn't realize until I read the acknowledgments that this is a reprint. The book originally came out in 2018. This doesn't matter, but I figured I'd mention it. The book was solidly enjoyable as both a romance and an adventure, but I found certain parts dragged a little or were belabored. I'll get into those minor things I wasn't partial to at the end, but first, the good stuff. The romance is great. You know from the start that it's going to develop, but it also doesn't punch you in the face with it. The characters are allowed time to develop not only physical attraction, but true emotional connection, something I find romance books generally rush or skip over at times. As such, when the sex scene arrives, it feels warranted. It's also a spicy one. The spiciness actually kind of got me off guard. I was like, oh wow, this is a bit more spicy than I expected. The characters are great. Nate is kind of a sad sack, but I mean, for reasons that make sense. And, it makes his characterization layered and complex. But Alex and Art were a delight. Alex is the stoic badass who rarely smiles, but who is a complete cinnamon roll inside. A character, trope that I love. And Artemis is quite funny. In truth, she's the main source of humor in the story. She's also perfectly balanced as a character given the reveal about her. She says stuff that a typical 10-year-old wouldn't say, but it makes sense, and the stuff she does say is kind of funny, and it never kind of goes too far with it, I found. I thought that she was really, really well done. And the dynamic between the three felt like a family, which I think was the goal, and it really, really worked. I just loved Alex and Nate, and I loved Alex and Artemis. I just loved all three of them. They all had varying dynamics with one another and as a group. And I thought that's hard to pull off, I think, and he did a great job with that. Now, I hesitate to call the book 100% cozy. In fact, I wouldn't really call it cozy. It has a cozy kind of feel at times, but there is, there is a big focus on found family and love and growing together, but there's also quite a bit of death, and Nate's parents died in a murder-suicide. This is mentioned in the first 5 pages, so it's not really a spoiler. And there's also mentions of homophobia. Just in case you were thinking this book would have no content warnings, no, it does get quite serious at times. It is not a cozy story. It just has some cozy elements to it. The story itself is a little slow, but I actually didn't mind the pacing. It helped the characters grow attached to one another in a way that you understand kind of how they care about one another and how they grow to care about one another. I do wish we'd seen a bit more countryside when it came to the road trip aspect. It would have been fun if they'd actually stopped at some cool places, or there was references to some places, but they were very vague. I wish we got a bit more kind of specifics with it. But I also just really love road trip stories, and this isn't really a road trip story, so that's more of a me thing. There were some things that didn't 100% work for me. So there's this talk show host that they mention here and there whose monologues are often included at length in the book. I'm going to be honest and say that I found those really annoying and I skipped them. I don't think they were needed. I think they could have just said, he went on a monologue about this, or maybe shorten them a bit. I just found they were annoying. It's I don't like listening to talk show people in general, and I don't want to read about it. But again, this is kind of a me thing. Art's specialness was also kind of way too obvious. You kind of know from the first chapter what's going on. That is fine. That's fine. I think we were kind of supposed to, as it's kind of a trope. But when Nate finds out, it takes forever for him to accept it. He goes on and whines about it for quite a while. I found this dragged on and could have been trimmed down considerably. It felt like when a household takes 90% of a horror movie to accept that the house is haunted. It felt a little bit forced, and I was just dude, can't he just be oh yeah, that makes sense, and move on? Because that's what I would do if I was in that situation. It's not like he's from 1890. He's from 1995. Overall though, I really enjoyed this novel. Klune has a wonderful, immersive, flowing style that is easy to engage with and draws you in. In that regard, it felt a lot like The House in the Cerulean Sea. So if you like Klune, if you liked that book, if you liked his other books, you will enjoy this one. It's a little bit different, but it's definitely a, Klune story. So yeah, thanks for checking out this review.